emphasize that, Todd, come on up. We're going to turn this into a little bit of questions for our guests as well as questions for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Todd. If our invited speakers would just kind of make a line here to face out in case we have some questions. I'm going to turn it over to Todd. So Todd, just describe a little bit of your background in city planning. Lots of community engagement. So you guys should, yeah, you don't. Well, David, you can wait. You can get questions tonight. So if you wouldn't mind, just pull it out and just turn around, and if there are questions, I can. You want to pull anything up on here? Or do you want me to just show this out? Yeah. Oh, there. Is that it? Cool. All right, I'm gonna step out of the way. I'll be back in a few minutes. We're doing. Go ahead, Todd.
Hang out back here. Thanks so much. So my name is Todd BenDor. I'm a professor of city and regional planning at UNC Chapel Hill, and you know, big thanks to Chris for actually talking about what it is to be an urban planner. You have an urban planner, and actually one of the things, you know, I wanted to talk about momentarily is what does it mean to actually plan, and it's really thinking about the future, right? What is going to be, and how ultimately do we make those things that we want actually happen? So as we've starting to talk about change on the island, I wanted to encourage you to reflect on the way that you think about change and what change means, and that ultimately means kind of reflecting on what you consider to be kind of the baseline. We've seen this kind of word baseline quite a bit. And part of it is considering that the baseline we usually think about as now, right? Right here, right now, what are conditions? What do they look like? But the reality is that the baseline, as Kimmy actually just showed, is the situation in 2050 with all of those red squares, right? That is the baseline. And so in planning, we often use this metaphor. Grad students here will be mad at me for saying this, but you're in a kayak in a river, in a rapidly moving river. And so we tend to look around and say, oh, we're in a kayak. It's like, well, we're in motion. And that's a really important thing to consider, is where is this motion taking us? And so changes that we make right now will not take effect until a very long time in the future. And even then will only occur at the margins, right? The new development that occurs, or the lack of new development that occurs. So it's very important to think about the kind of, you know, actually even build on, you know, it's steering a battleship, right? We're going to be, if we want to turn, if we want to move, we have to start paddling now. We have to start steering now to change what's going to happen in the future. So at the break, I asked you, what first attracted you to Bald Head Island? And this is the kind of word cloud that was created. And obviously, it's very scientific, but you're seeing, you know, all of the different facets of this. And so this is the type of question that you often see in what are called like visioning exercises. And this is usually followed up by kind of the bigger question, you know, what do you want Bald Head Island to be like in the future? You know, whether or not that's to look like, to smell like, to feel like, you know, what are the aspects of the place and what it will be like, say in 2050 or 2063, right? And so visioning exercises are usually these, you know, kind of big unifying exercises in trying to get, you know, residents to kind of collectively dare to you know, dream about their future together, right? What is this place going to be? And typically what we see is pretty major agreement among people. You know, no matter rich, poor, left, right, so on, we usually see a lot of agreement about what people want their communities to be like in the future. Huge disagreement about how to get there. But you know, really kind of profound agreement about what they want ultimately. And so we often kind of lose sight of the why we're trying to get to a place, and the what we're trying to get to in this vision of, say, Bald Head Island in 2063. And we get lost in the how. But I think it's important at this point to think about, what is the state in the future that we actually want it to look like. So one of the things Chris asked me to talk about was this idea of communication. And so a big facet of how Bald Head Island will change in the future and what that change looks like, I think will be shaped by how communication happens about the development that's occurring. So this is how we communicate with each other, but it's also how the village communicates with residents. And ultimately how we become informed about changes in the community that are happening. So one of the things I wanted to pose to the audience, and maybe to BHIC as well, is how do you get information about development and change on Bald Head Island? How would you like this to happen in the future? Is it good enough? Is there a better way?
Yeah, it's very easy to do that. Good enough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. One of the examples was when they wanted to change, we talked about the berry system going 45 minutes. I mean, it was just said to us when, not that it was a community meeting, but it was just kind of thrown out there. And no communication. Yeah, everybody was there to know what I'm talking about, but I think there was very little communication.
Well, I think we need to be clear in terms of who the communication's coming from. So in that instance,
Yes.
it was Bald Head Island Limited, not the village.
And I agree with you on that, but it still affects us.
We're all in. So what would make it appropriate where like it came from the middle, came from us, or came from DHA, I have to look at what was it? Or did it something else?
I'm Penny Robinson, and my feeling is that we have individual entities that are concerned about the future of the island, and they look at those issues through their own lens, and yet their lens does not always communicate with somebody else's lens, and certainly there is not enough. I don't think there is enough communication about where our decision makers are taking us in the future. I want to take this has been so informative about what the issues could be like, what some of the issues are. I think Scott mentioned something over there about the village is concerned about build out. This obviously presentation shows very much the impact of build out. I'm sure Conservancy and the VA, they're all part of that. The ability for this island and its entities to communicate across organizations and adequately keep the public informed, I think is much.
Very sure. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's
I know.
yeah. Please keep it going.
I think the other thing is that there's not a dialogue. Information comes one way, but there's not a lot of discussion about how the thing was decided, what the basis for the decision. There's no input really. No opportunity about decisions like that.
So I'll throw this back to you because I think that's a great point. So how would you, what you're pointing to is kind of inclusion and participatory decision making. So how would you want to be included in those decisions?
I think there ought to be open meetings that, decision makers or people who create these architectural guidelines or whatever have, and people get to ask questions. And they talk about what their constraints are.
I think of myself, I may not be very curious, but I think of myself as someone that's assimilating as much information as I can. And I've been a homeowner for 20 years, and that information affects my thoughts and decisions. And there's a lot to digest here. Every year I learn more. But here's the takeaway: 17% of this island's residents change every year. We got 17% brand new people coming on the island that whose literacy level is at zero, basically. And so then the question is, how do you get them up to speed to think like me, not like me, but just me. Give them the resources to make an informed decision.
This may exist and I just don't know where to look for it. There is a lot of information out there. We've sent a lot of information that we know, the BHA has a great newsletter that's full of great information. There's all kinds of great information from the Conservancy, and every other entity. And the problem for me is if I want to find something from the village, everything, I need some kind of a central community bulletin board or something online, something where I know I can go to this one place and then search the thing that I'm interested in finding out. And because I know the information is out there, I just don't always know how to find it.
I'm a little bit concerned with limited pulling out, because right now it seems to be the main publication that comes out is the Haven magazine. And they have kind of a lock on that with distributing it over at Deep Point. And then, of course, it is mailed to the property owners, I guess, to the rentals and management companies also. I think Robin's point is very good, because we have the Village Voice. We have the Haven magazine, we have the Island Report, we have the beacon that comes out from the chapel, we have the Old Baldy information letter that comes out. But like she pointed out, you almost have to go to each individual entity to find out what's happening. And of course, the Conservancy. Like this one local place that you can go to get all the information that you might be looking for. The other thing that I thoroughly resent, and I brought this up to Chris McCall, I have never seen, I've been here, first time I came to the island, it's 1975. I have not ever seen Baldhead Island advertised as come and live on Baldhead Island. It's always come and recreate, come and play, come and rent, come and have fun, enjoy your time here. But I've never seen it advertised as come and live and be part of the community.
Yeah, I'm gonna double dip here. Todd, is it Todd?
Yes.
You showed a slide which had a number of the attributes and
Yeah.
interests that people have in being here. It reminds me very much of some of the discovery that went into the Vision 2025 process. There are a number of those visuals that represented the answers that the residents gave to the 2025 questions. I think surveying property owners is essential to defining the future of the island, but also implementing once you have surveyed and once you've taken people's pulse is the only way you can get it done.
Well, there's been a lot of discussion about the turnover of property and kind of the rate of change of this. And so there's a couple of questions. Maybe we can kind of segment this generationally. So kind of for the older folks in the room, There's a question about. Look at you. Yeah. So, and I try to phrase this, right? So when you talk to your kids or your grandkids, and what do they say about, if they're talking about the future, if they're talking about, you know, motivations, the future, what do they say that resonates with you? How can they communicate with you about what they want and what they're concerned
Can I, on that topic, I would love to hear from one of the young people about that, one of the grandkids. But since you're kin, I think, you know, I mean, you become the audience. You know, answer that question for, like, from your perspective on that, from a grandkid's perspective.
I definitely,
Sorry, I mean, I trust it.
I definitely see the Conservancy as a hub, and this could be specifically because that's a community that I've interacted with most as opposed to the club or village or other political or chapel communities. The Conservancy is where I would say I go most. I think the Conservancy website is a hotspot. If I want new information, especially also because I'm not on the island, I'll go to the website. And then the last thing is conversations. I think someone in the audience mentioned having local interactions is a way to gain knowledge and stuff.
Hearing from the future, I think really bad. You know, one thing, breathe there. So that's making sure you listen and have a conversation. Now.
Yeah. So again, the question is, you know, what speaks to you? What, you know, gets your attention when you're talking to your kids or your grandkids? What they think about the future?
Right now, it's transportation. I'm getting back.
I think just fear that it's not gonna be the way it is now. These kids can't ride, can't ride their bike, go get ice cream. So many people lost nature.
My kids, for the most part, and my grandkids for sure, have grown up coming to the silence. They're only kids. They all have realized it's different. It's how it's different. It used to be, you're driving the golf cart, you wait, you don't know the person, but you wait, and they wouldn't have that. And now, my grandchild is so nice, and I don't know really how to explain it or how that, we can't achieve what is that, I guess. We can't, today we can't have like a test or something that we can only buy a home here, if you are, buy it, do it. But we can't do that.
Well, just to add to that, that when you look at the census count by US Census, what's happened over the last 20 years, more or less, is that the full-time island resident population has stayed consistent in numbers between, say, as low as 167, as high as 250. I'm not talking about registered voters, I'm talking about US Census data. So that number has stayed consistent, whereas the population growth has continued, right, that has continued. Right, those are the different people, so, we're obviously, Bald Head Island's unique, it's not like any other towns on the mainland where your population continues to grow, permanent resident population continues to grow. So then coupled with the fact that someone had mentioned, I thought I heard the VHA say a number of 50% since Hurricane Florence that property ownership has changed. Now, whether that's completely off the island or buying a different home. I'm not quite sure, but the number is definitely higher when you think about other towns. I like to say, I live in the town of Leland. If 17 or 20% of the town of Leland population just picked up and left, you know, you would never hear of that. I mean, Leland's one of the fastest growing towns in Brunswick County in southeastern North Carolina. If I could just make one other point on the communications. I hear you all, and it is definitely a challenge when you have the few major entities on this island that we have. They're all competing for messaging and getting out and sharing information. You know, prior to 2018, the village did not have a public information officer. What you heard from in village communications came from me in my part-time job. And thankfully, council brought on board a public information officer who I would say is just great. I was hoping to hear somebody in this audience say the village voice. Because again, I live in the town of Leland. I can tell you how many times I've gotten an email from the town, from their public information officer about anything that's gone on in the town of Leland. You know how many times? 0. Paul's back there, he lives in the town of Leland. You don't get that level of communications from the town like you get it here on Bald Head Island. So I just want to plug that.
So one of the things is the coordination. One of the things-
You get on the email distribution.
Well, so there's, I bought it almost 3 years ago and I'm not on whatever, it's just have to subscribe to it.
Right, you just have to
But
subscribe
I
to
don't
it.
know. Yeah, right, you know.
Well, I mean, but I think one thing that maybe it's coordination amongst us. Like,
Yes.
right, it's like Amazon of communication. You know, I think maybe that's something that we can talk about. You know, when we share each other information, but it's not. And I don't know, it's, people are overwhelmed with information.
Well, and the piece that puzzle is the point to the bottom of the previous, but then we have a 17 to 20% turnover in real estate. I think part of the challenge we have is where the communication starts, and it's that point of sale. Yeah, it's not, oh, I bought a house and now I come over and very for my first day of living or visiting the island. It's that I signed a paper saying I want to be a part of our community. So our entities, you know, but our entities have to figure out how to communicate at that point of sale moment. It's because one of the things we do is we're all community. It's the government and community organizations. We talk about overall conservancy and associations. But we're talking about commercial realtors, they're commercial entities, so they be part of this too, is better communication across not just the community organizations, bringing in that retail public, the corporate piece of the puzzle in a more consistent way, because we don't always do a good job of that.
And that's been an objective of Karen's, our public information officers, to have the meetings with the real estate agents to figure out ways to better communicate through that avenue.
I mean, same thing, I mean, what do we need to provide for those sites?
Good question.
Well, I've been a woman for a long time, over 30 years. And I wanted to make 2 comments about the density thing. And the first one is that I have yet to meet a person who has bought a place on the island that wasn't satisfied with the number of people that were there that day was just enough. And no more. And so that goes back to all of this program. But I also wanted to put a plug in for all the efforts that we did way back when there were more community meetings, maybe that people were taking an active role in. Conservancy was before professional staff and transition to professional staff. But every one of those planned developments that got adopted by the developer underwent transition down in density. Maybe a few of them, the real small streets, may have gone in through an original density and was pretty good. But everything, particularly on the East End, went way down in density. And a lot of good work was put in by the people on the island at the time to help see through that. There was a huge debate about having a pond out in the east end, and whether that's good for water or bad for water, as far as water loss and stuff. So I was gonna say that, unfortunately, when you look at all the red boxes, which was a beautiful thing, and I really never realized that Icus Roots had that few units in it. I really thought it was more fully developed. But when you look at all that, there was a lot of effort to get the densities to where they are. And fortunately for all of us that have been here up until today, all those places aren't built. Whether they all will be built or not is something in the future. And whether or not there's a reasonable mechanism to potentially make some of them not built, other than just land donation, I don't know. But there was a lot of effort. It was not a developer lopsided from 1992 on, in my perspective. It was not a developer lopsided, push everything through. It didn't happen that way.
So we have getting a little time. I want to offer you all a chance to ask any of these questions, and then I know Dave wants to say a few words. So if we have any questions, Todd, thank you very much. I just want to.
Yeah, so I mean, listening to the community, I mean, that's why we're here, right? And it's really interesting to get your perspectives, and the more we do that, I think the better off it are. But are there any questions specific to our guests here? Yeah, Rex.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Terry. You all had the decision one, and as I recall, you had several proposals for how to harden
Yes.
the area, and one creative proposal. Could you talk a bit about what it takes to both generate creative ideas in the first place, bring before the decision makers, and then to actually move forward with it? And was it more expensive to be creative?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure I can address that piece, but that is kind of interesting. So one of my answers to your question is that, the battleship, you almost couldn't get a platform that feels like it ought to be more conservative in its decision-making, right? I mean, it's the Navy, right? And it is led by folks who have been, their careers have been in the military. But one thing that my takeaway is that one thing about the Navy is that those, and really the military in general, they do not shy away from the fact that they have to understand the conditions in which operations are going to be undertaken. So they're taking, people and supplies and everything else, and their mission is for a success of an operation. And you can't ignore the conditions under which you're going to be either arriving in or operating in. And so my leadership, I think, deserves a lot of commendation to not ignore the conditions that they were observing every day. Because we look at that river every day. So that's, that's where we operate. And I think another piece was being curious enough to ask different questions. So we asked different entities, what's happening here and what would you do here? What's happening here and what would you do here? And related to that is that initial field investigations and gathering of data, like what is the structure and function of what's occurring here? And that, I think, led us to a nature-based infrastructure solution. As opposed to just, the harden, build walls kind of a response. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, that's good. All right, thank you. Robin, yes.
I have a question about moving shorelines, which I guess would be you at that, but, so where it's going in now is down there by the kind of near pollinator garden area. Yeah, and so that was an area that it was hardened.
There's a bulkhead there.
There's a bulkhead, thank you. So I guess my question is there any anticipation that there's anything that can be done further down the creek where there's not bulkheads, but there's a lot of water?
Yeah, so if y'all know where we're talking about, it's right
Yeah, by the pollinator garden, by the limit, the Riverside kind of kayak area where the new dock is just put in. So we're gonna be putting a living shoreline in front of, it is mostly bulkhead there now, but there was a good amount of marsh in front of that bulkhead that's just eroded really quickly over the past few years. So the goal is to have a living shoreline out enough into the water that they'll be able to build marsh back behind that, which will also help protect the bulkhead there. So that parcel of land belongs to the village, and so we were able to work with the village and get, permission to do that. Other parcels of land belong to other entities and people, so it would be, I'd be interested in doing it, but I'd be interested in extending it, all the way down almost to like the mouth of where the little Lighthouse Creek goes back, to help protect that marsh, because it is eroding on the other side as well. But that is limited property now, so that'll be future conversation and.
But it's really something that's only effective if you're dealing with an area that has volcanoes.
No,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
okay, so like an area like our house, there's something we can do to build up the marsh.
Yeah. Yeah,
We'll talk.
okay.
Yeah. But this, that's great, right? That's what we want, the engagement and the buy-in for opportunities, right? And so, yeah,
It's an alternative to bulkheads.
it is.
A lot of folks are not aware of that alternative option, so there's hopefully a program to show that.
Yeah, the village's been great working with us on this too, right? It's, again, it's like, how do we broadcast it more, which I think is what we heard, which is important, so. One more question, and then I'm gonna bring Dick up for, yes.
Yeah, hey, I've, long time tangential stakeholder. I've been curious, through the presentation, has there been consideration given?
On impact of
Visitorship, within the various projects, that might affect, the status of the island.
visitorship, meaning the number of people or just.
Number, impact. Increasing, decreasing.
So in other words, if US Census holds static and the numbers of those visitors, weekly renters continues to rise as the island builds out, what is the impact of all those? They certainly aren't going to be passing us waving their hands, right? But what are the other impacts associated with that? Things that you might see in other coastal beach jurisdictions, whether it's Curry Beach, Carolina Beach, Wrightsville, just not adhering to the rules, coming here and leaving their mind on the other side and doing whatever it is they want to do, their trash, their things like that is, I could see as, quick thought impacts.
What about like real estate values, right? I mean,
So in all the stuff that we do, it's implicitly in there. That's where the value comes from. Unless you stop this place from being an open market, real estate market, that is the nature of the real estate market. It's just going to happen until you come in with some sort of regulations that change that. And the one thing I'll point out with respect to that answer for that question with regard to the battleship, what's uniquely different about the battleship is that the military, their goal is not, intrinsically, it's not short timescale profit maximization. They're thinking much more long-term. And so I think when they make decisions like that, it's because they're not deep into a short timescale profit maximization, open, unregulated market. They have different interests. So I think until you peel yourself out of that world, you're not going to be able to make decisions like that. These kinds of dynamics that I hear in this room with regard to visitorship are not going to change.
yeah. So Len, can you ask after? I really want to get to Dick, unless.
I just wanted to make a comment.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
As the capacity of rental properties increases, the percentage of all properties that are for rent also that are unrented, rentable but unrented also increases. So more homes doesn't necessarily lead to more rentals.
Yeah. Oh, sure, but there's plenty of demand out there. plenty of demand for coastal rental and vacation.
And we can talk more. I'm happy to engage afterwards. So